In the NFL, we'll cover highlights of weeks 9 through 13, including the NFC West title already being claimed with 3 weeks still left in the season. The college football season wraps up with Rivalry Week, and a little bit more on the November 1981 edition of Back in Time Sports. The second half of the NFL season opened with what has become one of the NFL's hottest rivalries, Cowboys versus Eagles. Dallas dominated the matchup between 1968 and 1978 with a record of 20-2, but in 1979, Philadelphia won in Texas Stadium for the first time in 14 years. In the last 2 years, the teams have tied for the NFC East division title. The Eagles also beat the Cowboys in last year's NFC Championship game. In the first of this year's matchups, the Cowboys had trouble hanging on to the ball and started the fourth quarter down 14-3. But a 17-yard touchdown pass by Danny White and a 9-yard run by Tony Dorsett gave the Cowboys the come-from-behind win. Oakland quarterback Mark Wilson threw for 283 yards in his third game since taking over for Super Bowl hero Jim Plunkett. On the first play of the game, he threw for an 80-yard touchdown. Unfortunately, that one was called back by a holding penalty. But the Raiders moved the ball consistently and clinched the win over the Patriots with a 9-yard fumble return for a touchdown. The New York Giants and the New York Jets have played a preseason game annually for 12 years, but they've only met twice before in the regular season. The third meeting was dominated by the Jets' defense, specifically the defensive line, also known as the New York Sack Exchange. The Jets sacked Phil Simms 9 times in the game, 3 by Joe Klecko and 4 by Mark Gastineau. Both players now have 11.5 sacks on the season. Lawrence Taylor added 2 sacks of his own for the Giants, and there was only 1 offensive touchdown by either team in the 26-7 Jets win. St. Louis Cardinal quarterback Jim Hart moved up to number 3 on the NFL's career passing yards list after throwing for 305 yards in a 42-21 loss to Washington. The 37-year-old Hart is only behind Fran Tarkenton and Johnny Unitas. Minnesota almost pulled off an incredible comeback on Monday night after trailing Denver 19-3 with 8.5 minutes left in the game. The Vikings scored 2 touchdowns and then drove to Denver's 30-yard line, but the game-winning field goal attempt failed. The upset of the week belonged to San Francisco, who won in Pittsburgh as 5-point underdogs. The 49ers made a statement last month, beating the Cowboys by 31 points at home, and this victory on the road was the exclamation point. San Francisco is now 7-2 and may not be underdogs again this season. Parity was on display in Week 10 of the NFL season, with half of the games decided by 3 points or less, including 3 overtime finishes. One of those overtime games was in New England, where the Patriots tied the score against Miami with 10 seconds left in regulation. The Patriots couldn't keep the momentum, and the Dolphins kicked the game-winning field goal after an interception in Patriots territory. It was the 200th NFL win for Don Shula, who is in his 19th year as head coach of Miami. The Giants gave up a 94-yard punt return for a touchdown, a 41-yard interception return for a touchdown, and turned the ball over 6 more times, and were still leading Green Bay by a point late in the fourth quarter. Part of the reason was some trickery. New York turned a fake field goal into a touchdown, but the Packers pulled out the win on Jan Stenerud's 4th field goal of the game. San Francisco has now won 7 straight and hold a 3-game lead in the NFC West after beating the Falcons 17-14. The Falcons recovered an onside kick with less than 2 minutes in the game, but the second interception of the game by Dwight Hicks sealed the victory. Denver took the lead in the AFC West with a 23-20 overtime win over Cleveland. In what seems like a weekly occurrence, Steve Watson caught a touchdown pass for the Broncos, his 12th on the season. There was plenty of drama in Kansas City this week between the Chiefs and the Bears. With less than a minute to go in the game and down 7 points, Kansas City scored a game-tying touchdown on 4th down to send the game to overtime. After trading punts, the Chiefs committed their 6th turnover of the game, and the Bears worked their way into field goal range. Chicago was attempting the game winner when a Chiefs defender was called for unsportsmanlike conduct for stepping on an offensive lineman in an attempt to block the kick. The Bears got another attempt closer to the goal line and converted for the win. The upset of the week was in San Diego, where Cincinnati came away with an emphatic win over the Chargers, thanks in big part to a 102-yard interception return for a touchdown. Bengal quarterback Ken Anderson threw for 260 yards in the first half before being knocked out of the game in the third quarter. It was uncertain whether Anderson would miss any games for the Bengals, who are now leading the AFC Central by 2 games. A 4th overtime game in Week 10 appeared likely until Pittsburgh missed a 22-yard field goal with 20 seconds remaining, losing to Seattle 24-21. The Seahawks scored the final 21 points in the comeback win. Backup quarterback Mark Malone did provide a highlight for the Steelers. He was filling in at receiver and caught a 90-yard touchdown pass, the longest in Steelers history. In another highlight for Pittsburgh, Franco became only the third player ever to gain over 10,000 yards rushing for his career. In his 10th year with the Steelers, he has made the Pro Bowl in each of the first 9, owns 4 Super Bowl rings, and has also rushed for 1,500 yards in the playoffs. Dallas traveled to Detroit in Week 11, and the first half in the Silverdome went according to plan for the Cowboys, who jumped out to a 17-0 lead. But Eric Hipple and Billy Sims rallied Detroit, and the game was tied, with 25 seconds left, the ball at midfield, and no timeouts for Detroit. Overtime seemed the likely scenario, but Detroit managed to move the ball 18 yards, run their field goal team onto the field, and kick the winning field goal. The Lions are now 5-0 at home, but the problem is they are 0-6 on the road. Pittsburgh quarterback Terry Bradshaw has accomplished just about everything there is to accomplish in the NFL, but he managed to do something he'd never done before. He threw for a career-best 5 touchdowns in a 34-20 win over Atlanta. Bradshaw only threw 22 passes, and over a third of his completions went for scores. Falcons quarterback Steve Bartkowski also had a career best in the game, throwing for a franchise record 416 yards. One of the hottest teams in the NFL is the New York Jets, who have only lost once in their last 8 games. Their defense is the catalyst, which was on display again, holding New England to a pair of field goals in a 17-6 win. They also held the Patriots to under 200 total yards and added 8 more sacks, 3 each by Joe Klecko, who leads the league with 15.5, and Mark Gastineau not far behind at 14. In a windy game at Giants Stadium, Washington won their 5th game in 6 weeks by kicking 2 long field goals. First to tie the game in the final seconds, and then to win the game in overtime. San Francisco's 7-game winning streak was snapped by a player who was on their team when the streak began. Kicker Matt Barr was traded to Cleveland after Week 4 and kicked a last-minute game-winning field goal for the Browns. It was a tough day for Joe Montana, who had a season-high 42 pass attempts, but failed to complete a pass for more than 20 yards for the first time all year. Seattle had the upset of the week in the Monday night game with a convincing 21-point win over San Diego. The Seahawks defense didn't exactly stop the Chargers from moving the ball, not many teams do, but they did force 4 turnovers and took advantage of 138 yards and penalties for the Chargers. It was the first ever win against San Diego in the 5-year history of the Seahawks. Buffalo's playoff hopes were slipping away in Week 12 when New England intercepted a pass in Bills' territory, leading by 3 points with 1:40 left in the game. Understandably, the fans started hitting the exits. But after using all of their timeouts, Buffalo stopped the Patriots on 4th and 2 and got the ball back on their own 27 with 35 seconds left. After a 37-yard pass and a quick throw out of bounds to stop the clock, the Bills threw up a Hail Mary that was answered for a touchdown in one of the best finishes of the season. Cincinnati improved to 9-3 after putting up 571 yards and 38 points on the NFL's #1 defense. The Bengals defense also did their job, holding the Broncos to 5 first downs through the first 3 quarters. After the game, Denver coach Dan Reeves said Cincinnati was the best team they've faced all year. San Francisco also improved to 9-3, beating the Rams 33-31. Quarterback Joe Montana led the 49ers on a 2-minute drive that ended with the game-winning field goal as time expired. San Diego's offense got back on track this week. They averaged only 20 points in the last 4 games after averaging 34 in their first 7. This week against Oakland, they put up 55 thanks to 6 touchdown passes by Dan Fouts, 5 of which were caught by Kellen Winslow, which tied the NFL record. It appears the defending Super Bowl champions will not defend their title, with the loss dropping the Raiders out of playoff contention. Philadelphia had more first downs than the New York Giants, more rushing yards, more passing yards, won the turnover battle 3-1, and lost 20-10. It was only the second time this year the Eagles allowed a team to score 20 or more points, but not all of them were given up by the defense. The Giants returned a 4th quarter Ron Jaworski interception for a touchdown that put the game away. The New York Jets continued their hot streak and pulled even with Miami on top of the AFC East, beating the Dolphins at a very cold and windy Shea Stadium in dramatic fashion. Quarterback Richard Todd led the Jets on a 2-minute drive, which ended in their only touchdown of the day with only 15 seconds left on the clock. Green Bay traveled to Metropolitan Stadium coming off a 34-point blowout loss to Tampa Bay, and the first 5 minutes against Minnesota appeared to be more of the same. Down 14 points, the Packers outscored the Vikings 35-9 the rest of the way. Green Bay didn't allow any sacks in the game, and it was the most points they've scored in their last 53 games. Another team that didn't allow a sack this week was San Diego, who also won an important divisional matchup 34-17 over Denver. Charger running back Chuck Muncie had 4 touchdowns on the day and now has 18 on the season, one short of the NFL record. Oakland was down 24-3 when the Seattle punter received the snap with a foot out of bounds for a safety. The mistake ultimately proved critical as the Raiders pulled off the comeback, winning 32-31. There were 50 points total scored in the second half, with Oakland quarterback Mark Wilson throwing for 3 touchdown passes. Seattle quarterback Jim Zorn left the game late in the fourth quarter with a broken leg and was replaced by Dave Craig, who got his first touchdown pass in the NFL. Philadelphia at Miami was the matchup for Monday Night Football, and the Dolphins won a defensive battle 13-10. After the Eagles took the opening kickoff and drove 80 yards for a touchdown, the offense disappeared. Miami held Ron Jaworski to under 100 yards passing and managed 10 fourth-quarter points to pull out the victory. Philadelphia's loss was the Cowboys' gain as Dallas edged Chicago 10-9 on Thanksgiving Day. Walter Payton ran for 179 yards in a hard-hitting game that forced Cowboy quarterback Danny White to leave the game with sore ribs. The Bears missed a 49-yard field goal with 30 seconds left to give Dallas the win, who can now lose to Philadelphia and still win their division as long as they beat the Colts and Giants. San Francisco doesn't have to worry about tiebreak scenarios as they became the first team to clinch their division title by beating the New York Giants 17-10. It was the first title for the 49ers since they won the NFC West 3 straight years from 1970 to 1972. College football kicked off in November with Marcus Allen setting the NCAA single-season rushing record after running for 243 yards, giving him 1,968 on the year and breaking Tony Dorsett's 5-year-old mark by 20 yards. Barring injury, Allen should be the first to run for over 2,000 next week. BYU quarterback Jim McMahon also continued his assault on the record books, completing 44 passes for 538 yards and 7 touchdowns, and now holds 45 NCAA records. McMahon is closing in on the career passing yards record of 9,188. The marquee matchup for the week was number 2 Clemson traveling to Chapel Hill to take on number 8 North Carolina, which was the first ever matchup between 2 top 10 ACC teams. Twice North Carolina had first and goal situations, once at the 7-yard line and once at the 4-yard line, and both times had to settle for field goals. Clemson's offense did just enough to win the game 10-8 and remain undefeated. Another high-profile matchup was number 13 Miami versus number 14 Florida State. The Hurricanes had been on a roller coaster, coming off a monumental win over number 1 Penn State last week, but then a few days later finding out that they were put on 2 years probation by the NCAA and ineligible for postseason play this year. But Miami didn't let the bad news get them down. Quarterback Jim Kelly threw for 273 yards, leading the Hurricanes to a 27-19 win. Number 4 Georgia beat Florida 26-21 at the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville, where it has been played every year since 1933. The Bulldogs trailed 21-20 with 8 minutes to go, backed up on their own 5-yard line and drove 95 yards with Herschel Walker going over the top for the winning score. It was Walker's 4th touchdown of the game for Georgia, who have now defeated Florida by the score of 26-21 2 years in a row. In other matchups, number 5 Texas needed 11 fourth-quarter points to escape with a 14-14 tie against Houston in the Astrodome. Number 6 Penn State beat North Carolina State 22-15 with the help of a 51-yard touchdown pass on a fake punt. Number 12 Michigan trailed Illinois 21-7 after the first quarter, and then scored 63 straight points to win 70-21. Number 19 Arkansas pulled out an exciting 41-39 win over Baylor on a field goal with 12 seconds left. The cheer of "Stop State" at 28 didn't exactly work for Northwestern, who lost to Michigan State 61-14, their 29th consecutive loss, which set a new major college record. But on a more positive note, the helmet sticker of the week goes to the entire Iowa team. The Hawkeyes snapped a 20-game losing streak to Purdue and secured a winning season for the first time since 1961. The most anticipated matchup of Week 11 was number 5 Penn State hosting number 6 Alabama. The last meeting between the teams was in the 1979 Sugar Bowl, when number 1 Alabama beat number 2 Penn State on a dramatic goal line stand late in the game. The Crimson Tide weren't in the mood for drama this week, jumping out to a 24-3 halftime lead and holding on for a 31-16 victory, which put Alabama coach Bear Bryant in a tie with Amos Alonzo Stagg for the all-time career coaching record of 314 wins. The 68-year-old Bryant won his first game as the coach of Maryland in 1945. In other games, number 3 USC had a surprising loss to Washington 13-3, but what wasn't surprising was Marcus Allen running for another 155 yards and becoming the first player in major college history to rush for over 2,000 in a season. Number 8 SMU picked off 3 more passes, beating Texas Tech 30-6, and lead the NCAA with 28 interceptions on the season. Number 14 Southern Miss blasted off against number 20 Florida State, scoring on their first 7 possessions on the way to a 58-14 win. With the Golden Eagles offense still in orbit, ABC cut away early to show the landing of the Space Shuttle Columbia's second mission. Number 15 OU lost to Missouri for the first time in 12 years, 19-14, and it was the turnovers that did them in again. They lost 7 more and have turned the ball over 32 times on the season. The loss snaps 8 consecutive Big 8 titles won or shared by the Sooners. Number 19 Hawaii entered their game with BYU undefeated and ranked in the AP poll for the first time in school history. BYU averages 40 points a game, Hawaii is averaging 30, and the fans were expecting a lot of fireworks. But there were just a few sparks as BYU broke Hawaii's 11-game win streak 13-3. For the second week in a row, one of Tony Dorsett's records was broken, this time by the recipient of our helmet sticker, running back Darren Nelson of Stanford. Nelson ran for 122 yards, caught 6 passes for 60 yards, and returned 2 punts for 15 yards in a 42-3 win over Oregon, and now holds the NCAA career record for all-purpose yards. Week 12 was rivalry week in college football, and after it was done, most of the bowl matchups were set. In 10 of the last 11 meetings between Oklahoma and Nebraska, both teams were ranked in the top 10, and the only exception was when Nebraska came in at number 11 5 years ago. But this year the teams were moving in opposite directions. Number 5 Nebraska was surging, and unranked Oklahoma was struggling, which is the way the game played out. The Cornhuskers ran away with a 37-14 win, their first win in Norman since 1971, which many refer to as the game of the century, when current head coaches Tom Osborne and Barry Switzer were both still offensive coordinators for their teams. In another perennial top 10 matchup, Ohio State traveled to Ann Arbor to take on number 7 Michigan. Like the Sooners, this year the Buckeyes were unranked, but unlike the Sooners, their defense was up to the challenge, intercepting a pass, with Michigan attempting to put the game away in the fourth quarter. The Buckeyes then drove the field and took the lead with less than 3 minutes left, which would turn out to be the winning score in the 14-9 upset. Ohio State's win opened the door for number 19 Iowa to claim a spot in the Rose Bowl for the first time in 23 years, and they grabbed it with both hands, beating Michigan State 37-7. Iowa is tied with Ohio State for the Big Ten championship, but Iowa gets the Rose Bowl bid because Ohio State has gone more recently. In fact, it was the first time since 1968, when number 4 Indiana played number 1 USC, that Ohio State or Michigan isn't the Big Ten representative. Number 15 UCLA faced off against number 10 USC as the first step to determine the winner of the Pac-10. Marcus Allen ran for 219 yards and extended his record rushing total to 2,342 yards, but UCLA had the ball on the Trojans' 29-yard line with 20 seconds to go and time ticking. The Bruins decided not to run another play and let the clock run down to 4 seconds before calling a timeout. They lined up for a 44-yard game-winning field goal attempt, but the kick was blocked. USC defensive coordinator R.C. Slocum said that the Trojans had the max rush on, knowing there wouldn't be a fake with time running out. With the Bruins' loss, number 14 Washington State controlled its own destiny in the Pac-10. A win over their in-state rival would send them to the Rose Bowl for the first time since 1931. The Cougars put up a good fight, but couldn't overcome 6 turnovers and lost 23-10. With the Huskies' 8th straight Apple Cup, Washington will represent the Pac-10 against Iowa in the Rose Bowl. Notre Dame was leading number 13 Penn State 21-17 early in the fourth quarter and had the ball 4th and inches at the Nittany Lion 3-yard line. Penn State's defense held and gave the team the momentum they needed to pull out the 24-21 win. This was only the 6th meeting between the teams, but the first in a 14-year series between the teams. Penn State also started a 10-year series with Alabama last week, and in the distant future have already agreed to a series with USC in the 1990s. The top 2 teams remained perfect, with number 1 Pitt using 4 Dan Marino touchdown passes to beat Temple 35-0, and number 2 Clemson beating in-state rival South Carolina 29-13. Number 9 Southern Mississippi lost to Louisville 13-10, spoiling the Golden Eagles' hopes for an undefeated season. Southern Miss threw 2 interceptions in the game, which is 2 more than they had thrown all season. Number 18 BYU beat Utah 56-28, winning the WAC title and a spot in the Holiday Bowl. Cougar quarterback Jim McMahon's 565 yards passing were enough to make him the new NCAA career passing yards leader. There were 3 ranked teams on probation that were not allowed to play in a bowl game, and all 3 finished the season strong. Since number 6 SMU couldn't go to the Cotton Bowl, they declared their game against number 16 Arkansas the Polyester Bowl, which the Mustangs won 32-18, scoring 20 unanswered fourth quarter points, winning the Southwest Conference for the first time in 15 years. Number 11 Miami beat NC State 14-6, their 6th win in a row, including victories over number 1 Penn State and number 14 Florida State. Number 20 Arizona State gave the senior class a good send-off against Colorado State with a 52-7 blowout. The helmet sticker of the week goes to SMU's junior running backs Eric Dickerson and Craig James, who finished the season both averaging over 100 yards per game, which was only the 5th time in NCAA history that teammates have accomplished the feat. There was an abbreviated schedule on Thanksgiving weekend with the marquee matchup between number 1 Pitt and number 11 Penn State. A win by Pitt would set up a number 1 versus number 3 Sugar Bowl matchup with defending champ Georgia, which in all likelihood would decide this year's national champion. But it was not to be, as Pitt became the 6th number 1 team to lose this season. It started out well, with Pitt scoring on their first 2 drives to take a 14-0 lead, but it was all Penn State after that, scoring 48 unanswered points. Number 3 Georgia did its part in a blowout win over Georgia Tech 44-7, rolling up 570 yards of total offense. But with Pitt's loss, the Bulldogs will need a little more help on New Year's Day to defend their title. Georgia Tech finished the season with 10 straight losses, but at least their lone win came in the first game of the season against number 2 Alabama. Speaking of the Crimson Tide, who are now number 4 in the rankings, everyone had their eyes on the Iron Bowl to find out if there would be a new all-time leader in wins for a head coach. Alabama answered that question by scoring 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns to beat Auburn 28-17, giving head coach Bear Bryant his 315th win, passing Amos Alonzo Stagg for the most in college football history. It was Alabama's 9th straight win in the annual rivalry. Number 7 Texas beat Texas A&M 21-13 to secure a berth in the Cotton Bowl against the Crimson Tide. Florida beat Florida State 35-3 and received an invite to the Peach Bowl to play West Virginia. Florida State lost their final 3 games and will miss a bowl after appearances in the Orange Bowl the last 2 years. Both teams that will play in the Sun Bowl won their final rivalry games by large margins. Oklahoma beat Oklahoma State 27-3 and Houston beat Rice 40-3. Colorado State did not have as good of a finish, losing 59-6 to Hawaii and becoming the first team ever to go 0-12. The final helmet sticker of the year goes to quarterback Reggie Collier of Southern Mississippi, who became the first player in NCAA history to eclipse both 1,000 yards passing and 1,000 yards rushing. In the random sports section, the Los Angeles Lakers started this season with a record of 7-4. Not a bad record, but owner Jerry Buss decided a change was necessary and in a surprise move fired coach Paul Westhead. Assistant coach Pat Riley will take over the head coaching duties. In college basketball news, North Carolina was voted number 1 in the preseason AP poll. The Tar Heels, who lost to Indiana in last year's championship game, have James Worthy and Sam Perkins returning and are adding Michael Jordan, a highly recruited freshman. Major League Baseball awards were handed out, and pitcher Fernando Valenzuela became the 3rd consecutive Dodger to be named National League Rookie of the Year, and the first rookie ever to win the Cy Young Award. Raleigh Fingers of the Milwaukee Brewers became the first relief pitcher to win the American League MVP award, just beating out Ricky Henderson of the Oakland Athletics. The winner of the Canadian Football League's Grey Cup was not a surprise, but the margin of victory was. The Edmonton Eskimos, who came into the game as 22.5-point favorites, won their 4th straight title in a thrilling 26-23 finish. The Ottawa Rough Riders built a 20-1 lead by halftime, with Edmonton's only point coming on a single, which is a ball kicked into the opposing team's end zone and not run out by the receiving team. In this case, it was a missed goal. In the 4th quarter, Eskimo quarterback Warren Moon scored his 2nd rushing touchdown and added a 2-point conversion to tie the game at 23. A controversial double pass interference call wiped out Ottawa's chance at a late score, and instead Edmonton kicked a field goal with 3 seconds left to win the game. J.C. Watts, the rookie quarterback for Ottawa, was named the game's offensive MVP. That's all for November 1981. Looking ahead to the next episode, we'll cover the conclusion of the NFL season, as well as the wildcard games, plenty of college football bowl games, some Christmas gift ideas for sports fans, and much more on the December 1981 edition of Back in Time Sports.